The 11th film in the MCU in chronological order is Iron Man 3, the overall 7th movie into the MCU. Let's waste no time. Let's get right into it. Overall, Iron Man 3 is one of those movies that you're either going to like it or you're either going to hate it. Over the years, I've grown just to be indifferent towards it. A lot of my criticisms that I have for Iron Man 3 still very much stand, but I've also lightened my stance on a couple of aspects in this movie. So I'm going to do my best to illustrate the positives and the negatives. So let's waste no time. Let's get right into it. Positives first. Having Shane Black as the director for this movie was a great choice. I like Shane Black as a director. I've liked a lot of his movies as a writer. And I thought he was a great choice to do Iron Man 3. He gave this movie a more serious tone for the most part. I like the darker story that he and Drew Pearce wrote, with Tony Stark having to deal with PTSD following the events of the Avengers. I thought Robert Downey Jr. gave his best performance as the character as a result of him having post-traumatic stress disorder. We actually get a chance to see just how vulnerable Tony Stark can be, knowing that there's now a world that he lives in with gods and aliens and wormholes, and like he said himself, he's just a man in a tin can. So I like seeing the more vulnerable side to Tony Stark, and Downey Jr. played it perfectly. Have no complaints at all. And I like the little relationships that he develops all throughout this movie. Like, he and Pepper, they have expansion. They have a little bit of a romance expansion, a little bit. They're firmly together. They're living at the house. But their relationship is also getting a little bit fractured because of Tony's obsession with just tinkering with the Iron Man suits and trying to just find a way to cope with him and trying to find a way to cope with all the emotions going through his head. I like stuff like that. I like the tension that develops between Pepper and Tony. Like, Pepper's trying to understand Tony, but at the same time, she has trouble understanding Tony. So I like all that stuff. I'm not overly enthusiastic about what they do with Pepper in the third act, about how she's given the extremis virus, and then all of a sudden she just kicks all the lead villain's ass while Iron Man just watches. I think come on now, this is Iron Man 3, not Pepper Potts. I don't want to see Pepper, a side character, taking down the lead villain while Iron Man just watches. Wasn't a big fan of that then, not a big fan of that now. And the whole idea of giving Pepper the extremis virus, like, you knew nothing was going to happen to this character, so why even waste it for? I think that whole thing was just forced. Didn't really need to be there. So yeah, that's that when it comes to Pepper. You also have the return of Don Cheadle as Rhodey. I love Don Cheadle as Rhodey. I think he was good in this movie. I like the fact that because of the Avengers, they're backing off the War Machine name. They're going to call him the Iron Patriot as a way of the government to create their own version of a hero. So I like that whole little aspect, that whole little subplot. And I like how Stark constantly teases Rhodey about how War Machine's a better name than Iron Patriot. And towards the end of the movie, Rhodey does have some fun things to do. But he also has some fun things to do peppered all throughout this movie as well. So no complaints. Don Cheadle, always good as Rhodey. You have James Badgedale playing Eric Savan, who's like the lackey of Aldrich Killian. Eric Savan, nothing really to his character. He's just a bawling brute. But he does have some entertaining fight scenes here and there. His best scene is the Chinese theater and the tense scenes that he has with Happy Hogan, played with Jon Favreau. I think that's Eric Saban's best stuff. And of course, you have the whole Air Force One scene, which was probably the best action set piece in the whole movie. And I'll get to that momentarily when I talk about the action sequences. But yeah, as a character, Eric Savan is forgettable. Like, he ain't the most complex or deep villain. He's basically just there to be a muscle, and that's all he is. Speaking of the villains, I don't want to waste no time. So yeah, you have Rebecca Hall, who's in this movie, who plays a character. She appears in the opening prologue, which takes place in 1999, in which we also get to see Ho Jensen return in a cameo. And this prologue is actually very important because it establishes Aldrich Killian, who is going to establish Aldrich Killian and what Tony Stark did to Aldrich Killian, which is pretty much leave him on top of a roof. So yeah, that's all that. Let's get to what matters the most. And that is the two big villains, Aldrich Killian and the Mandarin. Now this is what I'm going to say. The first two acts of the movie did a great job at building up the Mandarin as this intense, just villain that Tony Stark's going to have a hard time taking down because you can't find him. And as he said, you'll never see him coming. I love that idea. I love the idea of the extremist storyline for what I was I'm sorry, of the extremist virus from how I was perceiving it as watching the movie, as the Mandarin pretty much using human beings and turning them into living bombs. I thought that idea was actually pretty clever and diabolical and just disturbing and sick. Like, this movie did a really good job at building the Mandarin up as like the ultimate threat that Tony Stark has to stop. I like the whole idea of him being like this, of him having very close ties to the war on terror. Like he's the Middle Eastern terrorist, so to speak, which also ties back to the first Iron Man movie because it was the Ten Rings organization in Afghanistan that kidnapped Tony Stark. So I thought that the Mandarin, this Mandarin was the leader of the Marvel version of the Ten Rings. They're doing it. Shane Black and Drew Pearce were doing a really good job at building up this Mandarin character as a solid threat, leading to what was going to be an awesome climax. And you have Ben Kingsley, who was putting on this really brooding and just scary performance. Like his performance was a combination of the MCU version of Colonel Kurtz from Apocalypse Now. So I was loving this whole thing. And of course, Ben Kingsley, very talented actor. He's a legend. Then we get to the twist, and it undercuts everything that I just said. So pretty much where my mind was going with this movie was turned completely on its head when I found out that the Mandarin was just a drunken goofball actor named Trevor Slattery who was just being paid to do this role, and Aldrich Killian is the real mastermind behind anything, which made me wonder why not bring back Justin Hammer if you're just going to do this shit? Because at least Justin Hammer is a better villain as opposed to Aldrich Killian, and I like Justin Hammer better. Now, listen, it's not a slight on Guy Pearce as an actor. Like, for the material that he was given for this movie, he did a good job. I just don't care for the character of Aldrich Killian. He came across as... Aldrich Killian, to me, just came across as a more serious version of Justin Hammer, only now he has superpowers because he created this virus called Extremis that gave him these powers. That's basically it. I thought Aldrich Killian to me posed absolutely no threat. And why they made him the lead and why they did this twist, they just did it to be shocking. That's really all it is. But it also took away from the third act of the movie because when I was watching the rest of the movie, I was like, really? Really? The whole thing was just an act? Really? It's just like it literally just took me out of the movie it took me out of the movie when I first saw this thing. And upon many rewatches, now every time I see Ben Kingsley on screen, I have it in the back of my head. Yeah, Stark, you're just being had. This is basically one big giant joke, and then but with something else going on in the background. I hate the twist. I still don't like the twist. I still don't like Aldrich Killian as a villain. I think he's just not that intimidating nor that imposing. The movie tries to set up a pseudo love triangle with him, Pepper, and Stark, with Stark being jealous of it, but it doesn't lead to anywhere. Like I said, if you're going to go in the direction you were going with, just don't bring in the Mandarin. Just have Justin Hammer be the villain of Iron Man 3. Him looking to get revenge on Tony Stark and him joining up with Aldrich Killian. Since they already established that Aldrich Killian was a scientist like Tony Stark and was at the expo, who's to say Justin Hammer wasn't at that said expo? And he went and he took Hammer Industries to AIM to help develop the Extremis storyline underneath. It would have been better than what we got now with this stupid Mandarin twist, which added nothing to the overall story, but just messed everything up. And because what was it? Later on in the year of 2013, they released the Marvel one-shot of Hail to the King, which completely retconned everything from Iron Man 3, and it's revealed that there really is a Mandarin, and he wasn't too kindly for his name being dragged across the mud. So yeah, like. I'm sorry, the whole Mandarin twist, I just did not like it. I hate it. I don't like Aldrich Killian as a villain at all. I think he's kind of lame and forgettable. He's just the anti-Tony Stark. We've seen a lot of anti-Tony Starks when you're going up against villains. I mean, if you're going to do an anti-Tony Stark, just bring back Justin Hammer. I can't stress that enough. But yeah, I did not like the twist. Nothing against Guy Pearce, talented actor. He tried his best in this movie, but the twist just so absolutely sucked. I just didn't like it at all. But then yeah. So and that's pretty much all I got to say in terms of in terms of the cast and the characters and stuff like that. Uh, let's go to the action sequences and try and wrap this review up. So the action sequences in this movie are actually the best parts of Iron Man 3. I love when the fake Mandarin launches an attack on Tony Stark's house. That shit was great and very thrilling. Loved it a lot. I like the scene of the Chinese theater where Happy's investigating Eric Saven, and then Jack Taggart just explodes and almost kills Happy. That was good stuff. Very dark. Uh, like I said, I love the stuff in Tennessee with Tony Stark and the little kid. I like how he has these little fights with with a character called Ellen Brandt, and another fight with Eric Saven. That was entertaining as well too. The best set piece, obviously, is the Air Force One scene. But before that, you have Tony Stark, who he doesn't have the Iron Man suit. So when Iron Man crashes down in Tennessee, he pretty much the suit loses power, and he's pretty much just has nothing. And I like how we get to see Tony Stark be Tony Stark, like the genius inventor that he really is, without the Iron Man suit, using his imagination to create weapons. Then he leads a one-man siege to the mansion where the fake Mandarin's hiding. All that stuff I really enjoyed, I really liked. I like seeing Tony Stark not being in the Iron Man suit and using his mind and his brains to solve problems instead of relying heavily on the Iron Man suit. Oh yeah, and the whole running joke of the Mach 42 constantly damaging itself, it was okay. The first 2 times it was funny, then the joke ran its course at the end of the movie. So yeah, that's a lot of the humor. That's a lot of the humor in this movie sometimes undercutting itself. In some places the humor can be well integrated, in other places it just comes across as just very bleh. But I do like the scene of Tony Stark and Gary the cameraman. I thought this stuff was fun. I thought this stuff was actually really funny. And Gary, the cameraman, for a split second, looks like Joaquin Phoenix. So that's mildly entertaining. I just lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, action sequences. The Air Force One scene is probably the best scene in the entire movie. Brilliantly done, very well directed, has a good amount of tension to it. Very tense, and I like how and Tony Stark uses his creativity to try and save these people by pretty much using the game of Barrel of Monkeys in order to make sure everyone is brought down safely. Great scene, loved it a lot, thought it was great. And then you have the whole third act, which takes place on a rig, and where Tony Stark and Rhodey have to save the president, played by William Sadler. The great William Sadler is in the MCU as President Ellis. He doesn't really have a whole lot to do, but it's fun just seeing William Sadler because I am a fan of his work. So yeah, you get the whole climax on this rig where Tony Stark has his legion of Iron Men, and the big battle ensues with Aldrich Killian and his extremist minions. So yeah, the third act battle is what it is. It was fine, entertaining for what it was. So don't really have a lot to say. But the big takeaway from this thing is the end of the movie where Tony Stark, Pepper gets cured of the extremis virus, and Tony Stark makes the call to get rid of the arc reactor in his chest, and yeah, that's pretty much how the movie ends. So, and I do like the post credit stinger where it's revealed that this whole movie was just Tony Stark talking to Bruce Banner like a therapist, getting things off his chest, and I like the whole idea of Bruce Banner constantly falling asleep because he's not that kind of doctor. That's actually a well integrated humor. So yeah, with all that being said, Iron Man 3 to me, it has a lot of good things in it. It has a lot of bad things in it. At the end of the day, I'm just gonna give this movie, you know what? This movie stands to me still as a 6.5 out of 10. I'm sorry, it is. The first 2 acts are really good, but once you get to that third act, to me, the movie falls apart because I hate the twist. I think the twist sucks, and it took what I was perceiving to be a very good idea and just made nothing out of it. And I just don't like Aldrich Killian at all as a villain. He has no intimidation factor to me. And overall, I just think the fight scenes between Aldrich and Iron Man, they're kind of boring. They don't really do much for me at all. I'm looking at my watch because I'm just not interested in them at all. So yeah, a 6.5 out of 10 for Iron Man 3. Let me know your thoughts in the comment sections down below. Like the video and subscribe, and I'll check you back next time for more.